Hey y'all, I'm your host, Aaron Smith of the Offshore Marine Service Association. Each Friday, I'll bring you the Offshore Briefing, a quick rundown of the week's notable developments, updates, and news you need to know in the offshore space. Whether you're on deck or at your desk, we're glad you're here.
Okay, welcome everyone to another episode of the Offshore Briefing by Maritime in America. As always, I am your host, Aaron Smith, and as always with me are my co-hosts, Angel Johnson and Ashley Smith. How are y'all?
Just fabulous on this dreary day.
Doing well. It got a little bit better outside.
We got one day of not rain here in Louisiana.
I know it rained like a couple hours ago.
Yeah.
And lightning.
Yesterday.
Oh, okay.
Yesterday it
It rained yesterday a lot.
And
Then just on top of our house.
oh,
Like stormed. Because I accidentally left something to be charged outside.
again.
Which is, yes.
Yeah, that's like the seventh time. So what? I know we have a lot to talk about. Who wants to go?
Well, we had we filmed our podcast earlier today with John McGowan, and he's just a fascinating man because I like, as we talked about in the last podcast, I like learning and I like facts and I like deep dives into things. Sounds like ya boy and rabbit holes. No, she likes rabbit holes. I like deep dives. She being Angel, Angie, Angel, Angela.
Just the first one.
And I like deep dives. Anywho, so then, and a few things he talked about that I didn't even think about. And one of them is the airlines. When you compare, let's just say Air France, right? Air France cannot fly from New Orleans to Nashville.
Right.
It can fly from New Orleans to Paris.
Right.
But it can't, just like it can't, like, and I was like, that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
But why are we letting foreign vessels do the same thing? Go from Port of New Orleans to Port of Mobile, right? And so I did a deep dive on that, and the U.S. restricts the U.S. airlines, and the government have said, it's all the same things we're saying, right? National security is number one.
Yes.
Considers infrastructure, aviation infrastructure, strategically important. They say the exact same thing about our vessels and our ports, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. During emergencies or military mobilizations, U.S. airlines can be required to support government transport programs.
They are. Yes.
Pretty sure that's what merchant mariners, right? Ding, ding, ding. Same thing. Most countries have similar restrictions. Countries restrict our vessels where they can go, right? So in addition to, it protects U.S.-based pilots, flight attendants, mechanics, unions. It's supposed to protect us. It's just super fascinating how that subsect is okay, but the mariners is different. And I don't know why I never compared the two. I've compared the trucking industry, which I did go on a deep dive on, what the licensing you have to get to be a truck driver, to have your CDL, or to have your maritime license, or depending on what type of vessel, you know what I mean. Again, that in itself is totally crazy, but not to the extent that the whole airline versus maritime is. I mean, that is bananas. Like, that is going to be my talking point from this moment on, because it's insane.
Well, I think it goes to kind of something John was talking about, is about that the airline industry or the trucking industry, on those cabotage laws, the opponents of those laws are not nearly as strong as the people who stand to benefit from getting rid of the Jones Act. You're not going to transport petroleum products by an airplane. You're not going to transport petroleum products in large scales by a truck. You do transport petroleum products by pipelines and ships. And therefore, you have very large companies which stand to make a lot of money who sell petroleum or move petroleum via ships. You have them as the opponents to the Jones Act because it means, like John talks about, they get to make more money.
Great. Well, when you get rid of the Jones Act, then I'm personally coming for the airlines, because that's bullshit. It's true. I'm sorry. Fair is
You're
fair.
their opponent.
Fair is fair. Remember how I went on that tangent? Additionally, just one more thing, and then I'll get off my. When you compare the CDLs to your mariner's license, again, whatever you choose to, the renewal frequency for CDL is typically 48 years. The one for a mariner is every 5 years with an additional medical and training updates periodically.
Every 2 years, yes.
Well, this is the bigger licensing. Cost and time to enter. CDL, often just a few weeks to a few months. Mariner can range from weeks, entry level, to years.
Yes.
Officer licenses, because, again, how is that?
Oh, well, now I think I saw.
There's just so much
I think I saw
that they get away with as well. I'm coming for them next.
I'm going for the truck drivers next. You're just picking fights all over the place.
Well, yeah. Well, you know how
We've
I feel
already
about
picked
that.
fights with the farmers too. So
I didn't pick fights with them. I just
picked
said
fights with the farmers.
No, we didn't pick fights with farmers. We just said the obvious to the farmers. We love the farmers. We love carrot. Hello, we own sugarcane in Abbeville, Aaron.
Yes.
So we are farmers ourselves.
Yes.
We're not against the farmers.
Ashley's the sugar queen, everyone. She
Just
makes dozens of dollars every year.
Tens of dollars. I'm not against farmers. I'm just saying, if you're going to compare it, compare it properly.
Right.
This just straight up pisses me off.
I think another point, although very minor, is that I think the plane and the trucking industry is a little bit more public facing. And so the maritime industry, I think
You're right.
The, what would you call them? The opponents of the Jones Act, they may be able to get away with it more because the lawmakers.
It's out of sight, out of mind.
Lawmakers don't really see it.
Yeah. No, it totally is.
But again, okay, then I'll get off my soapbox. One more thing. But to your point, truck drivers and the trucking industry is more in your face, right? You see the crashes, the holds up, all that. So you would think, I'm getting off airline, going to truck driving right now. You would think that there would be more criticism, control, regulation on that. Like, if any sort of boating accident happens, they're on that, as they should. I'm not saying don't regulate us, don't put, don't make our mariners go through, these rigorous tests, because they should be. We should all know what we're talking about, but it should be fair across the board. And I bring it back to the non-United U.S. citizen who was driving past the hours he was supposed to, and maybe was he texting? I can't remember. The car the 14 or the 18-wheeler that hit my parents and killed a 5-year-old.
Yeah. He was distracted.
He was not a U.S. citizen, and he was operating past his hours. They did prove that. Plus, slammed through, killed a 5-year-old boy, maimed my father, punctured my mom's lung, and then 3 other people.
Yeah.
It's just pointing that out. So I also have a little.
Yeah, but that's why. And I saw that some of our partners in the industry put this out, and I talked about it weeks ago. Was the DOT took the correct steps of stopping ill-qualified foreign drivers from being able to drive on U.S. roads for that very reason. We should not be allowing ill-qualified foreign mariners to be operating tankers on our waterways.
Agreed.
Same.
I'm not for making people do the due diligence, just like driver's ed. These kids should be going to driver's ed and having, locking the hours. That is not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, if you're going to do it to one set, you have to do it to everybody.
Yes. Yeah.
And I will step down for a moment.
Well, before we move on, I do think it's very important that people go to driver's ed school before they start driving.
I thought you had to, because I'm working on Campbell's, and it's a dumpster fire, all the shit I have to do.
It doesn't seem like it's a requirement anymore.
Also, maybe you should register your car and or have insurance.
Yes, insurance as well.
Yeah. Guess who has the longest commutes on this podcast?
Me. I'm probably in my car more than you are on a daily basis.
So what I always think is interesting, and I think the public always forgets about this, is there is always a delay between a government doing something and the effect. think about the massive, idiotic levels of government support that happened after COVID. We didn't see the inflation from that until years later. Think about the massive amount of illegal immigrants that were able to enter the country. The effect of that was not immediately seen. It was seen years later. Well, I think the Jones Act waiver is kind of similar in that people that there was not, and usually you see this on the negative side, the negative impacts of things are not seen for years or even decades later. And so people are right now saying, oh, well, there's not Americans that have lost their jobs because of this current Jones Act waiver. Therefore, there's no ill effects. Well, there hadn't been ill effects yet. They are now starting to be seen. I saw one report from a mariner, and this is firsthand report from a mariner, and I'm going to try to clean it up here. And that was last night we were discharging at blah, blah, blah in blah, blah, blah. Mid-discharge.
Never heard of it.
Yes. It's in the state of blah, blah, blah. Mid-discharge, we get notified that they're shutting us down and are booting us off the dock to bring in another ship. That ship is foreign flagged with a Jones Act waiver and will be loading product to take to various ports up and down the East Coast. The gauger said there's more Jones Act waivers vessels on the schedule. Has anyone started to see the effects of the Jones Act waiver? And then there's dozens of comments of people starting to see it. So in this case, you have a U.S. mariner their ship has gotten sidelined, even though they had product. They were discharging the product, but you have a foreign flag vessel coming in and they're saying, nope, we want that one. So you get out of here. We're not going to take your product anymore. We're getting the product coming in off this Jones Act waiver. And so, now that's not saying that this gentleman is, and it is, I don't say that just out of a sexist nature. It is a man who's posting this. So, that gentleman's not to say that he's immediately getting laid off, but this keeps happening. That vessel has to get stacked.
Yeah.
It's got to go away. And if that vessel gets stacked, he doesn't have a job. That's what you are starting to see that. What you're not seeing is you're not seeing a decrease in gas prices. Gas prices are up in every market. There's no decrease there. So, what you have is you're starting to see the negative impacts of this policy without a decrease. And what's interesting is the rates on the tankers are not any cheaper. In fact, on the East Coast, the foreign flag tankers are more expensive right now. And they're more expensive because of just how the general trade is working out and where the ships are going. But there's so many ships that are stuck in the Strait of Hormuz that there's not you have more expensive tankers from the foreign side being used. And I think they're getting chosen because people know they can see this effect. They can shove this industry out. They can get rid of it. And when they get rid of it, then there'll be no other option but to have a permanent waiver of the Jones Act. And that's the end goal of, I think, a lot of these people who have been opposed from it from the start. But I think, and this was the primary point that I wanted to get to today, while this Jones Act waiver has really shown, I think, a lot of people what can happen offshore, like Angel was talking about, out of sight, out of mind, over the horizon. And a lot of people, this feels new because of that. For us in the offshore industry, it's not, so we have actually faced for the last 50 years in the U.S. offshore industry have faced Jones Act waivers. They weren't called waivers. They were called letter rulings. And a letter ruling is an administrative waiver of the Jones Act. It's not called a waiver. It's not approved by the Secretary of Transportation or Homeland Security or Department of War. It is approved by some government lawyer who sits in Customs and Border Protection, and they get a request from a lawyer for an oil company, and that lawyer says, hey, I want to do this, and they paint the picture exactly how they want it to. They just like the scene in My Cousin Benny, where he's going to show you that wall, and he's going to show you how strong it is, and how, look at these bricks there. But what he doesn't show you is it's paper thin. So these oil company lawyers showed CBP this picture and say, here's what I want to do. Can I do this under the Jones Act? And they present the facts in such a way that it's always oh, yes, you can do that. And there goes a little piece of the Jones Act, because that waiver, that letter waiver, is not only for that transaction, it's for every transaction that is like that one. So there goes one little bit. Then another one comes along and says, hey, you let that one guy do this. I have a very similar thing that I'm doing. Can I do that? Oh, well, yeah, sure. There goes another, there goes another, there goes another. And this is what we've seen for, again, the last 50 years. And the result is not unexpected. In the sectors that we see in our industry where there have not been these letter rulings that have been issued, you have a massive industry. Some of the most technological vessels in the world are in the U.S. offshore fleet. Some of the coolest technology, like we always talk about, has been built in this industry. You're talking about an industry that has a value of $8 billion and is compound growth by more than 5%, almost 6% a year, and is only going up. But where these little letter rulings, these little administrative waivers have been given, what you see is U.S. companies have not been able to compete because they're competing against foreign operators that are legally allowed to use a different class of mariners, a class of mariners that can be paid less than U.S. minimum wage, that these companies are usually backed by foreign government subsidies, and they come in and completely undercut U.S. vessels and U.S. investment. So in those segments covered by these little waivers, such as cable lay, cable repair, heavy lift, you haven't seen U.S. investment because no one will invest to a U.S. company that has to play by one set of rules, and its foreign competitors get to play by a completely different set of labor, tax, and environmental rules. And then, what we've had is you've had this massive erosion of the industry, and it's kind of created this system of haves and have-nots, and that's really unfair and should not be allowed. And that's what we've had for 50 years of letter rulings. So again, it's that delay between what happens and the negative impacts that are only seen later. And we've seen that. And like I said, in the offshore space, and I think you can only expect to see the same in the tanker market now. So it just shows that we've been here before, and it's unfortunate to watch. But look, I want to give a glimmer of hope here, because it doesn't have to be this way. Also, what we've seen in the U.S. offshore space is in 2009, when CBP woke up and realized that they were wrong, and they tried to pull back about 25 of these letter rulings, these waivers. What happens was you had AMSA member companies, put $2 billion in investment into subsea construction vessels, those segments covered by those little waivers. And the shipyards that built those vessels are now building naval vessels and Coast Guard vessels, recapitalize the entire shipyard base. So just even from that little effort to overturn just 25 of those hundreds of little waivers that had been given, created this massive investment. So if you tell the American maritime industry, yes, you have government support, go ahead and build, it's going to build to a massive extent. But when you say, hey, you have to unfairly compete with foreign companies that get to play by a different set of rules, there's never going to be investment.
No.
So,
I mean, I wouldn't do that.
Exactly. It's common sense, but I just don't think people have ever gotten to see that before. And now they're getting to see that. So, Angel, have you seen anything?
I know. Are you on any soapboxes like we are?
Yes.
So I did go down a rabbit hole. I saw this article about the Strategic Petroleum Reserve.
Sometimes called the Strategic Political Reserve. Because it's not actually, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve is supposed to be used for what?
Petroleum.
Well, to protect us against international strife.
Yes.
But it's more often used when gas prices go high and politicians get worried about it. So it's called the Strategic Political Reserve.
Okay. So back in March, the U.S.
Whatever, loser.
Yeah, she just called me a nerd.
Yeah.
The U.S. agreed to release, okay. So the U.S. agreed to release 172 million barrels of crude from its SPR, which is the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. And that was part of International Energy Agency coordinated global release of a collective 400 million barrels from the member countries. And this was to counter the supply shocks brought on by the war. So just this week alone, it showed a drop of 9.1 million barrels, which now leaves the reserve at 365 million barrels. So the storage capacity is 714 million barrels, and it stayed close to that level until about 2010. But back then, the U.S. produced around 5.5 million barrels of oil back in the day, but now they're producing over 13 million barrels. So we are producing more. However, if the situation persists, there may be a problem. Now, in reading this article, I did go down a rabbit hole. And so I did want to just mention, which is why I paused earlier, because I felt like the opposite of a nerd when I was reading this. So I learned about different types of oil and how some refineries can use some oils and how other refineries have to use other oils. And also, the reserve is held in underground salt caverns.
So you really did go down a rabbit hole.
I did.
But last week was the largest ever release, single week release of the SPR.
Yes.
In the history of which, I mean, it released with the 9.9 million barrels last week.
And before that, the largest was 7.41 million barrels, and that was connected to the war in Ukraine.
And again, prices increase, so
political.
Strategic Political Reserve. But it is, I mean, to put this in perspective, is that inventories have now dropped. That the crude oil inventory right now is 9.1 million barrels. So you have the crude oil inventory is now lower than the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. So if you think about it, our checking account is now lower than our savings account by a lot.
I don't like that.
Yeah. So if you think about that, we are running out. So just something to think about. And, there is nothing in a Jones Act waiver that's going to help not having any barrels in the inventory or in the reserve.
Nope. And I won't get on my soapbox because I want to be factual, but yeah, if
Are you calling Ashley and or myself counterfactual?
No, I'm just saying I probably don't have enough information to speak facts about it. But to your point, again, if this situation persists, both situations, the war and the waiver, it's not looking good.
No.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, something really interesting is that if you look at the rig report, there are currently less than 20 active drilling rigs in the Gulf of America right now. So there is not, our domestic inventories are drying up, and we do not have a source of deep water oil that's coming on board right now. So just think about that. So I think we've all been on our soapboxes, regardless of what Angie says, if she has or has not been.
Who's Angie?
Angela.
Oh, Mom.
Mom.
So I think we can all now bid adieu.
I do call people Mom too, all the time.
You do, yes. All right. I'm getting out of here. Everyone, have a good weekend. Be safe.
Happy Friday.
That wraps up another episode of Maritime in America. We're proud to highlight the voices and stories that keep the American offshore industry strong. Thanks for spending a few minutes with us, and remember, the course ahead is shaped by those who step up and steer it. If you liked what you heard, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your crew. Tune in every Friday for your offshore briefing, and don't miss our next full episode, dropping soon with a very special guest, Mariner's Perspective. Catch you next time.